Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me for this call for Achievers. This is the first of 7 live calls, and I'm also recording this, so afterwards you'll get the recording, you can share it, hold on to it, and hopefully people you know will also benefit from these calls. I intentionally, in keeping each of the calls very personal and hopefully customized to you. Now, it's likely that you are probably more than one of the 7 types. And if you haven't taken the Student Archetype quiz yet, go to alexellison.com/quiz, and there you'll find the Student Archetype quiz, which leads to one of 7 primary student archetypes. So each week for the next 7 weeks, we'll be doing these calls. You're welcome to come back for another one. You're welcome to retake the quiz as many times as you want. Oftentimes students will have sort of a first and a second place archetype or an archetype tie. The quiz online on my website gives you your sort of top scoring archetype. So welcome to all of you achievers. The achiever archetype hits home for me personally. I was definitely an achiever in high school. And it took me a while to kind of, I'll say, recover from the detrimental sides of being an achiever. Only very recently did I sort of have to say to this achiever side of my personality, thank you. You've served me well. You helped me get into a great college. You helped me start my own business. You helped me travel internationally and do wonderful things. But you're starting to hurt me, and I don't need that anymore. And this is something I think a lot of students can relate to, and I think a lot of parents of high-achieving students can relate to, that the achiever personality type really gets ahead. They handle things very quickly. They have quick recall. They're sort of great problem solvers in chaotic situations. Achievers also are very good at hiding stress oftentimes. And once you get to be known as an achiever, people start to rely on you and put a lot of pressure on you. So I know when I was a kid, and I'm sure some of you on the call can relate to this, let's say you're in middle school and there's a group project. Who does the teacher put with the achievers? Well, typically the teacher will put the underachieving kids with the achievers, knowing that the achievers will hold up the group. And so, you know, if not put in check, that can start to really wear on a student, especially a young person. You start to sort of be loaded with more responsibilities than maybe you're capable of. Sometimes people will start to treat you like an older person because intellectually you're there and you've got the maturity in many ways, but in many ways you are still young and learning and figuring things out. You still make mistakes, you still misplace your homework. And it can feel like the achievers don't get a pass as easily as some of the other student types do because they've come to be known as these high achieving kids. So that can be really tough. I think it goes without saying that achievers are really susceptible to overwhelm and overload. I have worked with achievers who were able to maintain a healthy balance and take care of themselves physically and mentally. I've also worked with achievers who've suffered from eating disorders. And, you know, one of the wonderful bits of wisdom, one of my previous students with an eating disorder who's also an achiever shared with me, and she says you should tell every student this, is to find things outside of academics that feed you, that you find fulfillment from. Because what can happen sometimes with achievers is that they become a little bit obsessive. And that can be good in some ways, but really damaging in others. And so it can be helpful sometimes to spread out the things that you're achieving in. So if you are only a student and all you're focusing on is your schoolwork, you're going to become hyper obsessive about that one thing. And that can really lead to instability. So if you spread yourself a little bit more thin, not too thin, but if you cast a little bit of a wider net and engage in activities and pursuits outside of the classroom, outside of just pure academics, that's one way to maintain some balance. You know, for example, you might engage in sports, and sports are a really nice outlet for achievers because they have the competitiveness, they have an opportunity for leadership, to sort of reach new levels in their ability. And that's one nice way to establish some balance so that you're not only an achiever in your academics. The other thing that can happen with placing all of your sort of achiever energy into your academics is when you don't excel academically, when you don't get the A, you can feel like your whole world is crashing down on you because that was all you had going for you. I know I've talked to many students, and I can relate to this as well, who say, if I don't get into an Ivy League college, all my hard work in high school have been for nothing. Now that's a really dramatic statement and really unhealthy if you take that out into the real world and begin to live your life with sort of that way of thinking. Now, you know, you want to be able to say, okay, I have my academics, and yeah, I'm pretty good at my academics, but there are also a lot of other things that I live for and a lot of other things I excel in and am good at and enjoy and I'm hungry for outside of just getting that A. So to place all of your weight in just the academic bucket, to place all of your hopes in just the academic bucket can really be damaging for anyone, but achievers seem to be more likely to do this. Now, some of the things that I like to point out that achievers are really, really good at are staying on track and staying on task. They're really good at learning new skills quickly and competently, putting in the work now for future rewards, you know, kind of being a future focuser, and staying focused on those long-term plans. You know, not everyone can do that very easily. Many students are what I call present focusers. They're much better at living and being in the present moment than planning for the future. And achievers are actually pretty good at, you know, being willing to do the work and get through some of the less exciting stuff to reach those longer term payoffs. You know, but some of the things that are difficult for achievers are avoiding comparing yourself to other people, focusing on what is right for you rather than what will impress others, feeling good about your work when there is no reward or recognition, and staying motivated even after you've experienced failure. The comparison part is something that I pay attention to a lot as someone who works outside of the place where a lot of this comparison is happening, namely school. But I also work with the students who are going to school every day. So I have this really unique role, and I'm in this kind of interesting place. I work here from my home with students around the country. And so I'm not in the environments where they're going every day, but I get to hear about it. And I sort of hear this language like, well, I don't know how I didn't get into this school because I know someone else, Sally, who got into this school and her test scores were not as good as mine. Or, oh, I'll never get into that school because Susie got a perfect ACT score and she didn't even get in, so there's no way I will. So comparison is a natural thing that we humans do, and it's actually smart in many ways. For example, it would be silly to think that, you know, getting a 2.0 and a 20 on your ACT is going to be sufficient to get into, say, Harvard. We know that that's not sufficient because we can see that other students who get into Harvard don't have that record. So there is a healthy level of comparison, but when it becomes unhealthy is when you really start to completely assess, you know, your self-worth and make all your future plans based on what students are, you know, who you see right around you. It's also very limiting because I know many students who are sort of big fish in small ponds, meaning they think really highly of their ability because they're not around very competitive students or they're in a really small high school environment. Conversely, other students who are in much more urban environments or larger high school environments are comparing themselves against other types of students. So it's just not a great habit to get into, to constantly be comparing yourself to others. And it can be very difficult to sort of stay in your own lane. But one of the suggestions I make when it comes to college planning for achievers is to try to explore colleges that are outside of the norm and tend to get overlooked. You know, it can be really stressful to only look at the same 20 colleges that all of your friends are applying to, because then you really get sucked into this comparison culture. So be adventurous and try to look at colleges that are sort of under the radar, maybe colleges that are in middle America, that are kind of in the flyover states, or look at colleges that aren't even in the United States, but internationally. You know, one of the things that I have found has worked really well for Achievers is to look at schools in other countries. Usually that happens to be Canada or the United Kingdom. Those tend to be most popular right now, and also for language reasons, those tend to be the easiest. But you know, when you sort of step outside of the college admissions chaos that is in the United States, you're going to maybe elicit some blank stares from people like, oh, I've never heard that school, or that's not in my wheelhouse. They won't really know how to handle it. But it's also kind of exciting to not even play that game and to sort of play in a different sandpit, if that makes sense. And that can be a really healthy thing for Achievers. The other thing that I say to Achievers is, when it comes to handling stress and anxiety, things like practicing mindfulness, and of course now there are so many different apps, can really work. Meditating, also just having quiet time and quiet space can be very helpful. But I'm also a big fan of journaling, and there's a wonderful daily journaling practice called Morning Pages, and there's actually a YouTube video you can watch called Morning Pages. And it's just this daily routine, almost like a ritual, where you journal in about 3 pages every morning. And even if you have nothing to say, you can literally write, I have nothing to say. I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write. I don't know what to write, until you do think of something to write. And this can be a really good activity to clear your thoughts, to focus in on what went wrong, what went right yesterday, and what's going to go well today, and what's kind of on your mind to get done today. This can be a healthy practice and a helpful practice for all students, but I think especially Achievers who might be more prone to cram a lot of activities, a lot of assignments, and a lot of goals in their heads. For those very goal-oriented students, daily journaling can also help you sort of tease out what are the goals that are more immediate and what are the goals that are more long-term. What are things that require my immediate attention, and what are the things that I can kind of put on the back burner for a little while. So that can be a helpful way to also prioritize. Another thing that I've noticed causes a lot of angst for all students, but especially Achievers who might be more prone to stress and anxiety, is to just gain context. Now, what is context? Well, if you're wanting to know what it is that you might want to major in, it can cause a lot of stress when every time you go to a new party or an event with friends and family, people ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? Or what are you going to major in? Or where do you want to go to school? And so you start to just grab for things and make things up just so you can have an answer. So what can really help is just to get some context. What is it that a doctor actually does all day? What is it that a lawyer actually does? One of my favorite ways to get context is to job shadow. An internship is a longer term commitment where you're actually doing more substantial work, but a job shadow experience is when you're really just sort of a fly on the wall for one day or a couple of days in a professional's environment. And oftentimes these people you shadow are family friends, so start thinking about who you know and who your parents know. And just this one day of exposure can really be so helpful to help you understand what goes into this type of career and what does this lifestyle look like. And then to back up, what did that person study in college? Maybe it has nothing to do with what they are doing now, but maybe it's more linear. And so you can start to look at those things. Also, visiting colleges or doing pre-college programs is another great way to get some context around what it is you might want to do in this next step. And having that exposure and having that clarity will make it so that you're not just making this stuff up. And it'll also ease some of the stress you have around the uncertainty about life after high school. We can't calm all of the, or answer all the uncertainty or satisfy all the uncertainty, but certainly by doing job shadows, pre-college programs, visiting different places, this will start to give you a better idea of what is out there. And hopefully when you're out exploring what's out there, you'll start to open up about the possibilities so that you're not stuck in the same silo as all of your friends. Again, when you're only looking at the same schools as everybody else, only considering the same jobs or majors as everybody else, you start to get sucked into this comparison culture. So by branching out, visiting more schools, meeting different kinds of professionals, you'll really begin to follow your own path and go your own way, as the name of the quiz is, rather than trying to plan for college the same way that everybody else is and kind of getting swept into that herd. So I want to have an opportunity to answer some of your questions. And before I do that, though, I want to just quickly run through a few of the college recommendations that came with the Achiever Custom College Plan that you would have received after you took the quiz. And so you'll see I have 5 college recommendations just to get the ball rolling. So I like to just put a batch of 5 out there. I call it the first 5 when I'm working with my comprehensive students. And I want this to just give you a glimpse into schools that are really conducive to achievers and where achievers can do quite well. One of the things I kept in mind when I was coming up with this list is that achievers, really do want to be in competitive environments most of the time. They just have to figure out ways to keep that in check and to keep their competitiveness in check and to keep the comparisons in check. So I thought of schools where they would get sort of a competitive environment, where the academics are rigorous, where there is a level of selectivity, but where the environment is more cooperative, inclusive, and sort of healthy. So the first school I have on the list is Swarthmore. This is a small liberal arts college outside of Philadelphia, and Swarthmore is often called a mini Ivy. It's also kind of seen as a mini University of Chicago because of the similarities in sort of culture. It's a openly quirky school with quirky students who sort of march to the beat of their own drum. Some students will go on campus and immediately say, that's too nerdy for me. I had a student say that. And other students will walk on and say, oh, absolutely, this is what I'm looking for. These are the people I'm looking for. Swarthmore in general is a very cooperative place where students really support each other, even though it's hard to get into in the single digits and acceptance rates. It is a very cooperative place once you're there, with students really supporting each other and professors supporting students. There's definitely a culture there of supporting student projects. You'll see this if you visit campus with the giant Adirondack chairs on campus. That was actually a student's project years ago, an engineering student's project. And speaking of engineering, it is one of the few liberal arts colleges in the country that has general engineering. That's quite good. So the Claremont colleges I put on here as well. The Claremont College Consortium consists of Claremont McKenna, Pomona, Pitzer, Scripps, and Harvey Mudd. And all of these are small campuses, but they share one larger campus. So it's sort of, you feel like you're in a college, but on a bigger sort of university campus. It sometimes feels like that. And these are newer colleges, but you will get a sense that they feel like kind of the old East Coast liberal arts institutions, but you're in Southern California. In Claremont, California. So each of the 5 schools has sort of their own character. And what's sort of nice about that environment is that even if you're at Pomona, you can be around sort of the science and engineering students at Harvey Mudd or kind of the environmental students at Pitzer and have a little bit of diversity so you're not so secluded with a certain type of student. These are all very selective schools as well, but very much inclusive and caring and cooperative, especially because the emphasis here and at a lot of liberal arts colleges is on instruction, like what goes on in the classroom and what is the quality of what happens in the classroom, as opposed to the level of research or how much a professor has published. So that's something to think about as well. How much attention are you going to get as an undergraduate student, and are your needs going to be met, especially as an achiever who is not going to be satisfied with sort of a half-assed job. Whitman College is in southern Washington State and in Walla Walla, Washington. It's a pretty rural college. It attracts a lot of students who are definitely driven academically and want a competitive academic environment and a slightly selective school, but who maybe don't want all of the pressure and all the competition that comes with a lot of the elite East Coast schools. Students at Whitman, and I think this goes for most students in the Pacific Northwest, tend to be a bit more laid back. outdoorsy, a little bit more carefree, but definitely academically driven. I put Dartmouth College on this list as well because I see Dartmouth College as the Ivy League that really pays the most attention to undergraduate students. And again, for students who are going into their first 4 years of college, not going into graduate school, the focus for you really should be the quality of teaching in the classroom. Of course, research opportunities are also important, but surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, at some of the smaller liberal arts colleges, the research opportunities are going to go to you, the undergraduate, because you're not competing with graduate students in many cases. So places that put primary focus on the undergraduate population is generally what you want to be thinking about or looking for. Bangor University is at the northernmost tip of Wales. This is a school that will remind you of Oxford or Hogwarts. It has a very old sort of Oxford feel to it. In fact, the same architect who designed Oxford designed part of Bangor University. And so for students who sort of want this quintessential Ivy League looking institution, this can be very attractive if you're very into that aesthetic, which I don't want to minimize that. That is definitely something that students are looking for, and that's a valid point. This is also for students who want to look internationally, who want to step outside of the rat race that is U.S. college admissions and consider something a bit more adventurous. So, you know, even though Bangor University is in a different country, you're still in the United Kingdom, you're fairly close to London, but you're in this wonderfully beautiful, picturesque Welsh, basically fishing port town, and it's idyllic and it's lovely, and it would be a wonderful place to go to school. You're also going to be around a fair amount of international students. You yourself would be an international student as a U.S. student going there, which is kind of a fun thing. That's sort of a fun niche to be in at a university. And there is sort of special attention and events for international students. So that adds a whole other experience to college compared to if you were to go in the United States. Okay, so those were the 5 schools that I put together for this initial, for the first batch of colleges for the Achiever. And I want to get to some of your questions here. So let's see. Okay. So sometimes I feel like because I started high school as an achiever, I have to maintain that image. How can I scale back without disappointing people? I used to always joke, I still do actually, that you know, it's better to start off as a C student so that every step of the way, sort of if you get a B and it's, oh, wonderful, you went up from a C to a B, or when you get an A, it's, oh my goodness, she's really improved, we're just so proud of you, as opposed to starting off as an A student. Everyone sort of begins to expect that you're going to get A's. So I completely understand where this student is coming from. What I would say is, you know, think about, like I mentioned earlier in the talk, think about how you can branch out beyond academics and try to master new activities besides school. Try a sport, try another club, try a hobby, try to get really good at something else. You know, there's definitely benefit in just doing something for fun and not being concerned with how good you will get at it. But many times the achievers they're looking for that. They're looking for the mastery. They want to get really good at something. They put their all into anything, and that's a wonderful trait. Just try to put your all into multiple things, not just school. And I think that can sort of help. And it'll also, to people close to you, send the message that you are not a one-trick pony, that you're multifaceted, that you have diverse interests, and people won't begin to just expect one thing out of you, you know, producing A's. They'll start to see you as a more dynamic individual, which you obviously are. You know, I would also say that I'm not suggesting that you completely just let your academics go. I think that would drive you crazy as an achiever. But I think what you can do is start to question why you feel the need to sign up for all AP classes, or why you feel the need to study for 5 to 7 hours a night. The student I referred to earlier in the call, she was definitely someone who obsessed over her homework. And I talked to her after she graduated, and she admitted that she really, it was an unhealthy obsession that she had with her homework, and that in retrospect, she really did not need to be spending so much time on her homework every night, and it was unnecessary. And how wonderful if someone had told her that or helped her realize that before she developed a really unhealthy lifestyle, and that eventually turned into an eating disorder. I think we can all start to really calm the anxieties around high performance in the classroom, and try to calm the obsessiveness over perfection. And I wish there was a more emphasis on messing up, because when you're messing up, that means you're trying, and if you're only succeeding, I wonder how much you're actually pushing yourself. Even though it can feel like you're pushing yourself quite a lot, you might just be doing busy work. So think about what's actually fulfilling to you, and what actually is pushing you to grow. Is it spending a few more hours on the same math assignment, or is it actually teaching yourself a new skill or going out and learning a new skill? So long as the math grade doesn't completely bomb, and it probably won't, you'll probably surprise yourself, you could probably scale back a little bit and establish a healthier balance in your daily schedule, and a healthier balance between work or schoolwork and everything else. So the next question here is, my parents don't push me at all. It's all me. They think that I'm too competitive, but I like the way I am. How can I assure them that I'm fine? All right, so I have heard this, interestingly, more lately than I used to. I feel like when I first started my practice, it was kind of the opposite. The parents were pushing the students, and now I feel like I see a lot of students who are sort of much more hard on themselves than their parents are on them. I'm also seeing students exhibit much more pragmatic behavior around how to succeed, and what kind of job to get, and how much is reasonable to pay for college. Sort of these very pragmatic viewpoints are coming from the students, not necessarily the parents, is what I'm seeing in my practice, which is kind of interesting. I think what you could probably start by doing is having an honest conversation with your parents about what brings you joy and what you're hungry for. What is it that you are trying to achieve? And if they have a better understanding of that, I think that would help. But I also think verbalizing that would give you a better understanding of what it is that you're actually trying to achieve. Is it to get into a good college, or is it to prove something? Is it for you, or is it for somebody else? Is it to make a lot of money, or is it to make a difference? I think if you articulate some of these things out loud with your parents, that'll actually probably bring a lot of clarity to yourself, and probably give your parents a lot more confidence that you know what you're doing. And so I think, again, asking yourself, one, is this behavior healthy? Do I have balance? Do I feel good about myself? Do I have high self-esteem? And also, what is the purpose of this? As I mentioned earlier, if you feel that all this work will have been for nothing if you don't get into X university, that's not a healthy equation, because then you're placing all of your self-worth and all of your happiness into a few admissions officers' hands who will likely never get to meet you and know you as a whole person. So that's a very dangerous equation. And so I really caution students to not get into that. And I just had a parent recently ask me this when I was giving a talk at a school. She asked, what if my kid doesn't get into his first choice school after all that he's done and all this work? And I wanted to say, and I didn't have the guts to say it, but I wanted to say, he's hopefully a better person for doing all these things, for taking interesting classes or challenging classes, for volunteering in his community, for taking on leadership roles, all the things that do look good on a resume, absolutely. Hopefully those things were also good for him and for his soul and will make him a better person. But again, if you're doing all of these things because you only want to impress a future admissions officer and it's not for you and it's not making you happy, then you're going to be even more devastated when you don't get into that school, because you'll have definitely saw that this was all pointless. So having that sort of reality check is a really good thing to do. And again, I think journaling can help with this, or verbalizing these things to someone you love, parent, or someone you trust, like a friend. School is all I've ever really been good at. How can I step out and break that limiting image of myself? So I think I've already touched on this a little bit, but I will just say, if you engage in more diverse activities, and if you get more context, those two things, so engaging in new and interesting and diverse activities and gaining context around what college actually looks like, what kinds of colleges are actually out there. We have thousands to choose from, not just the 20 that you always hear about, and also gaining career context by shadowing people. Those two things, I would say, are the primary things that will help you really start to respect and appreciate all that you offer, and that you are not this one-trick pony, that you really are multifaceted. And if you're only going to ever engage in one thing, that's going to be your one measuring stick. If you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll live its whole life thinking that it's stupid. That's what Albert Einstein said. And I think we do that all the time. So we use the wrong measuring sticks. We only ever compare ourselves to certain kinds of people in certain kinds of environments. And so we make these assessments of ourselves incorrectly with limited information. So if you can put yourself in new and interesting environments around new and interesting people, that will help you begin to see that you have more than one identity. And this is one of the things that I think people can misinterpret about archetype assessments or quizzes like the one that you took on my website, but others as well. There are so many, whether it's a BuzzFeed quiz or something more scientific like Myers-Briggs. We run the risk of pigeonholing ourselves, which is why I think it's really important that we talk about the results and not just sort of swallow them whole. You really digest them and piece them together and sort of understand yourself better through those assessments. For example, knowing that you're an achiever gives you a lot of great information about what's easy for you and what's difficult for you. But within that achiever umbrella, you could be more artistic or more adventurous, more academic or more athletic. So you have a very multifaceted personality, but this is just one set of guidelines to look at, or one roadmap to look at, to help you move forward if you're feeling stuck, and to also give you sort of a new vocabulary bank to talk about yourself in a more intelligent way and to describe yourself better to people, whether that's just your friends, your family, or eventually in an interview or on a college application. So hopefully that's what it really does, is give you more confidence to articulate what it is that you love, what you care about, and what path you're on. So this looks like it's coming from a parent. My kid is an unhealthy achiever. I'm really worried about her. What can I do to slow her down a bit without making her feel like I'm coddling her? I was just reading this article about coddling and how it can definitely have some devastating effects. And so the first thing I would recommend is to just ask yourself, are you helicoptering? Are you sort of over engaging in your daughter's life? Are you showing signs of living vicariously through her experiences? But also, do you have certain expectations for her? And so I would first get really honest with yourself about what the college application process or just the high school experience is for your daughter, what it was for you, and have an honest conversation with yourself about your expectations for your daughter. And after you do that, then I think you can have a more caring and authentic conversation with her, with your daughter, about your true and honest concern for her well-being. If you feel that the negative sides of the achiever personality are overtaking the positive sides of the achiever personality. And I think that's a great place to start, is the positive sides. Start off, and you can use this guide as a starting point. Start off by saying, here are some things that I know you do really well. I know that you have this amazing grit. You overcome anything that's put in front of you. You have this amazing determination that will help you complete goals 5 years, 10 years down the road. So start with those positive traits, but tell her that you're concerned about some of the negative traits like comparison or overload or overwhelm or stress and anxiety, and that if not put in check, they're going to overtake the positive sides of her personality. And that's what you don't want. I also recommend to parents who are worried about their sort of overzealous teens, who, especially during the college admissions process, oftentimes the achievers are only looking at the top 10, top 20 most selective schools in the United States. And so by going on college tours and looking at schools that aren't on that top 10, top 20 list, and even looking at schools internationally, that will hopefully help your daughter see just how big the world really is and just how wide her opportunities really are. And if she can get excited about some of those unique, diverse opportunities, then that might help her to go her own way, forge her own path, and put some healthy blinders on for at least a little while, so that she's not getting sucked into jealousy or comparison or unhealthy competition, to kind of teach her to live in her own lane a little bit, especially during this college application process if she's embarking on that. I'm not sure how old she is or what year she's in, but I think that can be really helpful. I've had many students who, just dragged their feet all the way to a college tour, did not want to see a particular college, but once they were there, they fell in love. This happens all the time. And I've had students who were really devastated about not getting into an elite school, but couldn't be happier now at the school that they ended up going to, and it was a school maybe that they would have never considered before. So that's really hard to imagine, though, if you haven't been to these campuses. And I know that's hard to visit all of these campuses. Do your best with online research. There's a website called University TV that does some virtual kind of college tours. Also, some college websites will have virtual tours, even just looking at images, Google Images, to get an idea and to hopefully open up to this idea of going to a school that isn't the one that's always just shoved in their face, or isn't the one that's on all their friends' sweatshirts. So that can be a really healthy thing, I think, especially for an achiever who's causing some concern for the parent. So I think that's all the questions I have. This has been really fun. Please keep the questions coming. You can reach me at alex@duncecp.com or at alexellison.com. And again, you're welcome to take that quiz again. If you would like a PDF copy of your Achiever Guide, your custom college plan for achievers, please email me and I'll be happy to send that to you. Otherwise, you will automatically get the guide as a web version after you take the quiz. Thanks so much for joining me. Again, you'll get the recording of this call afterwards, and please share it with anyone who you think would benefit. You're also welcome to join me for future archetype calls. Next week, we will be talking to the artists. So I hope you'll join me. Thanks so much and have a great night.